Teachers of Reddit. How have you secretly rewarded or punished a student? Story 1. I teach a high school elective course, aka not as important as English or math, and I had a class that was 23 boys and 2 girls. If you are a teacher, you know this is a terrible, terrible setup. Teenage boys are definitely pack animals and are constantly in a struggle to establish their hierarchy, especially if females are limited. Anyways, these guys were a constant ball of energy and were always doing stupid guy stuff. They went through a phase where they cup-checked each other. This went on for weeks. Little Johnny in the back would walk up to sharpen his pencil. BM, cup check. So one day in class on student, we'll call him Travis, asked to go to the restroom. I gave him the pass and sent him on his way. The rest of the class was quietly working when another boy in the back yelled out, "Oh, my God." Travis just texted me a picture of his. Now, I know how these guys have acted all semester, and I also know the zero-tolerance mess that school systems deal with. I knew this could end up very, very badly if it was dealt with by administration. Immediately got the kid to delete the text, calm the riotous laughter going on, and somehow managed to get them all back on task, but Travis wasn't back yet. I sure as wasn't going to let him smugly get away with this, so I called his mom and had her on hold, told her that Travis had done something that I did not approve of, but I felt it best if he would explain his actions to her instead of me. On a side note, I teach animal anatomy, so terms like testicle, etc. are common vocabulary. So in walks Travis with this eating grin on his face. He thinks he has succeeded until I casually look up from my desk and let him know his mom is on the phone. They're in front of the entire class. He had to explain that he had just taken a picture of his testicles and sent it via text to his buddy in class. You could literally hear Mom screaming through the phone. Once he finished, I spoke with her and told her that I felt the situation would be best handled by her, and thanked her for her time. That day I won. Story 2. I used to always show up late for my 10th grade science class. One day, we had a little chapter review quiz at the start of class, and naturally, I'm a minute or two late, so I walk over to my desk, and the teacher hands me my quiz. It's all really advanced questions comprised of polysyllabic biology jargon that I've never seen. Question after question is material that I'm pretty confident we have never ever covered in the class. After about 2 minutes, I look up to see how everyone else is doing on their quiz. Everybody was watching me, and when I looked up, they all started laughing. The teacher had printed up a single fake quiz with super complicated biology questions just to with whatever kid ended up showing up last of the quiz. MS Cohen, you were a fun teacher. Thumbs up at it since a lot of people asked. This was at Bard High School in Manhattan. Story 3 had a kid who was working a job late into the night in order to help his family while trying to finish his senior year in high school. His dad had been laid off and his mother was disabled, so they were barely making it. He told me that he worked late into the night and he had to miss days of school, too. He did the best he could in my class, but just couldn't pass after missing so much class. He was a senior and a good kid who needed my English class to pass. Figuring that the kid's life was already hard enough and that his family was struggling enough, I secretly added some points to assignments he hadn't done so that his final grade went from 50 to a 61. Just enough to pass and graduate. I don't like giving away grades, and I never told him. He just thought he had passed. Story 4. A local music store was going out of business where a lot of students rented band orchestra instruments. I had a student who has a serious lifelong disability, but she still participated in many things and is an outstanding student and person in general. She went through some scary medical things, but never complains and is so genuinely happy. Her family is blue-collar hardworking, but I knew her medical expenses were a constant in her family's life. The store was offering a discount, plus their normal rent-to-own discount, for students who had instruments to outright purchase them before they closed for good. I contacted them, and they let me pay the remaining cost of her instrument and kept my identity a secret. Edit wow. I was beat after a day of Halloween fun at work, 4th graders in full costume at 8:15 a.m. Yikes, and it is crazy to see what I woke up to now. Just FYI, I am a lady music teacher. Thank you also for the gold. I'm glad so many people had wonderful experiences in music. My minor PSA is to please support and demand your local school district fund music and art other creative programs properly. Due to unfunded mandates, funding disparities, and them seeing how special areas do not fit neatly into Common Core evaluations, programs available for students are continually at risk. Story 5. I assigned a very high point value project to my HS Chem class. A bright, popular student turned in a half-ass effort. I knew she knew that she half-assed it, and I knew she had a conscience, so I handed her my grade book and told her to fill in her own grade. I said, whatever you write will be your grade. No questions asked. It was fun watching her squirm for 10 minutes, begging me to make the choice for her. Story 6. I have a student this year who makes my life. She is blatantly disrespectful, nasty to me and classmates, and thinks I'm her personal waitress. Part of this is that every day she tries to hand me her work when I'm running around the room getting class started, but she does it in this manner that implies I'm her maid. I tell her every day to get up and put it in the turn-in box like everyone else. She unwinds until some other classmate does it for her. Thursday, she left her extra credit 2 points on her test. Not that much on her desk like it was my job to go get it after class. I threw it away. I'm not sure this is punishment as much as expecting her to follow directions, but I can't honestly say I would have done the same to other students. Small, petty justice, but I did it nonetheless. Story 7 was teaching at a non-public special education school, designed primarily for non-compliance emotionally disturbed behavioral issues students. TLDR, Professor Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters, the worst of the worst inner-city gangbangers, etc. Noticeable lack of adamantium skeletons. A young man, we'll call him Delonte, accidentally reveals an interest in Shakespeare during a literature class. I was in the midst of overacting the many roles of Macbeth to an absolutely ridiculous degree in the hopes of snatching some semblance of attention. Over the course of the week, the students get progressively more and more involved, become actually interested in the story as I explain the horrific war crimes committed and discuss the themes of violence and manipulation. Every young man in that classroom nodded their heads when we talked about Lady Macbeth fuckery. A chorus of yup and yeah. None of the students had volunteered to read any of the parts, which was expected. My solution was to act out each part as if my audience were in love with the show. The kids would either volunteer to read or they would suffer the 1,000 deaths of having to endure me reading. After a solid 30 minutes of performing, I arrived at the conclusion of the class, as well as the play, with bated breath. Me reading Macbeth, let fall thy blade on vulnerable crests, I bear a charmed life, which must not yield to one of woman born, silence. And just as I began to explain Macduff's confrontation and what it might mean to Macbeth, Delonte shot up to his feet, pointed a finger at me, and without his book shouted, "Tell thee, Macduff was from his mother's womb untimely ripped. OMG. Them feels, it was an awkward lump." I applauded the class and the young man. Later, during the students' IEP individual education plan, it's basically a meeting where old people in the field of education decide what your teenage years should look like. I filed the student as advanced in language arts, recommending him for the AP literature class at the school he was transferring to. It caused a bit of a disturbance. Unbeknownst to me, Delonte was having trouble in his other classes. He didn't understand his teachers. He didn't understand nor complete his homework. He showed a general confusion with the common high school protocol. My observation was that this was a behavioral issue, that the material was not challenging, and so it was not worth his time. In any case, I left my report and recommendation that he be transferred to the highest level reading course. The kid was interested enough in the reading of Macbeth to memorize a partial line and sit in waiting. Given the average behavior and interest of his peers, this stuck out to me. I don't know, felt important. Approximately 5 months later, I received an envelope in the mail. It was from Delonte Smith and a home address that I recognized from when he first got out of juvie. Inside the envelope was an invitation to the 2012 graduation ceremony of the high school he transitioned to. It warmed my heart, made me feel good, I won't lie. It was always great to hear the rare success stories of these kids, the ones where they were able to evade the system long enough to become an adult. Upon closer investigation of the card, I found that MY information was filled out on a guardian, and below it all, he wrote, "I will try the last, before my body, I throw my warlike shield. Leon Macduff, ND be him that first cries hold." Enough. Not sure if that fit best with the OP's request, but in my heart, it's the greatest thing I have ever been a part of. Edit drunk spelling grammar. Sorry guys, it was Friday night. I was knee-deep in a fantastic Cabernet, well, a second one. I'm actually surprised there were only 2 glaring mistakes in the typing. It made sense in my head, but I wouldn't have been surprised to find my post just a long stream of SDL KJ slowed KFJ slowed KF so on. Then I told I don't can OWSDF. Replying to questions now. Also obligatory don't gold this. Donate to charity, give to homeless by Weedet comment. But thanks, edit again, that school was a treasure trove of stories. Some were inspiring and great like this one. Most were not, but they were pretty crazy nonetheless. Students swashbuckling with used syringes they picked up off the street. Check. Parents using 11-year-old kids to peddle drugs and for prostitution that CPS practically witnessed a dozen times but did nothing about. Check. Rival gang hopping the fence and storming the school to kill a student, but instead solving things with a choreographed dance. Sharks. If a student can dance on an essay where they obviously have no idea what they're talking about, it'll give them some credit for the attempt. For example, I ask you to discuss 3 major causes of the French Revolution. Causes we covered in class. You don't know them, but in the essay you try to extrapolate some possible causes using information you do know or attempt to morph the question into a topic you're prepared to discuss. I call that dancing because a good performance can be moving and a poor performance is laughable. I've gone as high as 75 credit for a good dance. IMHO, it demonstrates a better mastery of the material than actually parroting back what I've been talking about for the last 4 weeks. Auto, if you pull any of that shows up on 9gag, like give this drawing of some stupid meme an A or whatever, I will burn you for the rest of the semester. You so much as omit a semicolon, and it's half credit at best. Story 8, I've added points to students who were on the cusp of failing or would get letter grade improvements. If they were behaviorally or socially good people, I feel it's worth rewarding people who try hard or have good character as much as it is worth rewarding content. Story 9, I was the student in this case. At the very start of 10th grade, my mother was in a motorcycle accident where she should have died, ended up in ICU, various hospitals, etc. for over a year. Meanwhile, I have arthritis, so I get sick, easily psoriatic, genetic. During the 3rd term, I was sick for a week, on top of already being behind from getting 2 hours a night to work on assignments because I want to visit my mom daily. I go to my European history teacher to explain it, and he immediately dismissed all my missing homework assignment for the term because he knew I was an excellent student who didn't deserve a poor grade for this, his words, not mine. I owe that man my 1B from that year, and he's been a major reason that I'm so motivated to do well for the rest of my high school career, along with my mom still being around. Story 10, I asked my professor if I could turn in a report by the end of the day instead of during class time. Since I wasn't finished, he said it was okay, no problem. He ended up grading harsher than other students, and I'm convinced it's because I turned it in late. Story 11, this is complicated. I was technically the teacher, but legally the student a week into my grade 11 coding class. Our teacher's 10-year-old son was in an accident. His skull was cracked open, and he almost didn't make it. But we didn't know that we were given a substitute teacher, since the school board anticipated just a week. Well, it turned out that the teacher ditched the entire semester to care for her son. It's heartbreaking in hindsight, but we simply didn't know. Anyways, the first sub we got was the one who stayed. Even though he had zero coding experience, the teacher emailed him lessons each day, but he simply couldn't understand. English was his second language, and he was a math teacher to start. This teacher was trying to teach a subject totally foreign to him. And that's where I come in. See, even though I was 16, I was familiar with coding, HTML, CSS, whatever the scratch is. Ever since I was 13, I had known some basic skills from playing Neopets and formatting those silly little websites. So when it came time to learn Turing, it was like a second language to me. Haha, sorry. Anyways, this teacher quickly realized that I was able to figure out the lessons immediately. Our real teacher slides would come through the Dropbox, and I'd have the program working in minutes while the rest of the class was dumbfounded. Our substitute was the first to learn about our teacher's son, and I think he was told about a month in, because right about that time, the teacher started asking me questions. Now, I pitied the guy. He was a timid, gentle teacher who had recently immigrated from Eastern Europe, of course. Half of the class was horrible to him, telling him to shut the F up, calling him AP. The poor guy was too scared to tell anyone because he thought it was his fault. So I taught the guy everything I knew. Once it started, we had a system within days. The sub would teach the lesson. I'd have a go at it. Then the teacher would come ask me questions while the class was distracted. Most of the questions had to do with the execution of the code, things that could break a program but weren't covered in the lesson. I'd show the teacher my program and explain exactly how it worked. Then the teacher would go around and answer everyone else's questions, returning to me. If anything came up, some students caught on and started coming to me directly. And if they were nice to the teacher, I'd walk them through my codes. However, I enjoyed taking them down a notch. I taught them a lesson in humility and made them ask the teacher, "Oh, you need help with that? Yeah, it's subjective. You'll have to ask the teacher for help. Sorry." Over the year, I came to realize that tests were being made with my knowledge as the standard. In the end, I got an easy 93 in the course. The only thing I struggled with was binary. Every other aspect of the course came instantly to me. Honestly, had I gotten over 95 in the course, someone would have gotten suspicious. I didn't mind. After all, our final project, a battle robot we constructed and programmed ourselves, didn't translate well to the physical world. Still, I have a feeling to this day that I was given some bonus marks. I think it was the substitute saying thanks. We both knew. Even though he was screwed over by forces beyond his control, he put an immense amount of effort into our class and was always so nice. Favorite substitute of all time. TLDR, took grade 11 coding. Teacher's son, 10 years old, was almost fatally injured. Teacher never came back. School board assigned a random substitute. School board threw said substitute under the bus. I had background knowledge in coding and figure out the course instantly. I taught almost the entire course by proxy. The substitute survived the whole semester. I got a 93 in return and trolled some racist. It was great. Edit sentence structure, fix the summary because it was weird. Edit 2, a lot of people seem familiar with the course. We worked with Turing and made robots using the Vex Robotics kit. However, I can't remember whether Turing programmed the actual robots. But the program was incredibly similar, and we used Turing for other things too. If it helps, the final Turing project was making a Guitar Hero style program. Story 12, I was the student, and the secret kindness was from my guidance counselor, not a teacher. I skipped class a good bit in my senior year, but I was a huge goody two-shoes. It wasn't a rebellion thing, just trying to handle some pretty heavy life circumstances at the time. I never went far, and most of it was just trying to stay afloat in schoolwork. I got caught skipping class one of those times. I was hiding in the school auditorium, studying for my math exam later that day, while my friend worked in the tech booth. This was the second time I'd been caught skipping that week. And since I was a girl and my friend was a dude, the teachers who caught us were sure we were up to something a little more devious than studying. They made very clear that I was in huge trouble, and that my guidance counselor, who knew me and what was going on in my life quite well, would be called. When she came in, she looked terrifying and told me I would have to come to her office because this was such a big offense, and told the other teachers that I'd be punished to the fullest extent. I was appropriately shaking in my little goody two-shoes boots. But when we got to her office, she dropped what was apparently just an angry act and quietly told me that I could stay in her office and finish studying for that math exam for the rest of the period, and essentially just kept watch for me the whole time. That moment really stuck with me, and the rest of her kindness throughout all of high school absolutely got me through a few of the shittiest years of my life. Kids who misbehave aren't always. UPS, man, great teachers and mentors can keep sight of that and really make a difference. Story 13, it's only a little thing, but when I'm marking assignments, if I can see that a kid has really tried, write them a little note like, "Great effort, Michael. I can really see your algebra skills developing. You have come a long way since I started teaching you, and I know you're going to get a great grade at the end of the year if you keep working this hard." I think there's something really nice about a written note. I do this especially for the quiet kids who might not want you to draw attention to them in class, but it's my way of saying, I do see you working hard even though you think you are invisible. Story 14, I'm usually cool with a student charging their phone in my room, but they have to ask first. If they don't, I try to guess their password till their phone is locked for 12 hours, or better yet, until they have to sign into iTunes again. Story 15, I never graded based on anything other than academics. That is to say, the assignments, quizzes, and tests. No adding point for good kids or taking away point from bad kids. I try to be as unbiased as possible. I didn't think it was right to give a student a judgment of their academic abilities based on non-academic things. I also don't factor in class participation. It feels too arbitrary. And while I do think it's crucial to get kids to participate, I just don't think taking a portion of their grade hostage is the proper way. Of course, I taught grade schoolers. I'd probably have a different opinion if I was dealing with high school kids. Story 16, I never fudge grades one way or the other. However, when I know a student has really put in the effort and is genuinely trying, I'm more lenient with due dates. Within reason, I'd rather they learn the lesson and be able to apply it later than meet a deadline. Story 17, not a teacher, but an occupational therapist that works in an elementary school, had to guess how many Legos contests at the end of the year. This kiddo just has a sad life and always tells me how his siblings were happier before he was born. This is a sweet kid. Not a mean bone in his body. Guess who won the Legos? Story 18, I'm not a teacher. But this happened to me. Long story short, my father was trying to have me taken away from my mother. He contacted my guidance counselor SP, and I'm still not sure what their arrangement was. All I know is that she started pulling me out of class and buying me candy and comic books. And she kept asking me weird questions about my home life. Before too long, she called me to her office and had a stack of 12 comics on her desk, every Marvel and DC book that came out that week. She told me they were mine, but first I had to talk to a social worker and tell her a few small lies about my home life that would add up to me getting forced to live with my father. I told the social worker what was going on, and she called my mom, gave me the comics, and sent me home for the day. Never saw the guidance counselor again. Story 19, a friend is a teacher in an area where there are a lot of Indians from India. The parents normally come in feeling extraordinarily entitled and yelling at the teacher for having their kid receive A B rather than A. He won't budge because, well, grades are grades. Because of that, he grades students with parents that are nicer to him with a tad bit more favor. Story 20, I used to play poker and chemistry with my friends. We always seemed to lose decks of cards, so one of us bought a 4-pack. 5 minutes into our game, our chem teacher noticed and confiscated the deck. But little did he know we had 3 more, until a minute later when he confiscated the second. By the end of the lesson, had taken all 4 decks. We collected them at the end and went on our way. Cut to next chemistry lesson, and we're playing poker again. After 10 to 15 hands, We realized that no aces have come up. We looked through the deck and only counted 48 cards. Bit of a pain, but we had 4 so we could use the aces from another deck, except none of those had them too. We looked up at our teacher, and he was waving 16 aces at us. He said if we didn't all pass our upcoming test, he would give the cards back to each of us at Parents' Evening with our parents present. Story 21 Punishment. I pretend to randomly pick an essay from the pile and read a portion to the class. What I actually do is showcase a selection of the worst writing and poorest thinking so that the lazy students are ridiculed before their classmates. Works like a charm, because the shame makes them do better next time. I guarantee you will see the results of it. And let me clarify this, I've used this tactic with college students who are required and expected to know beyond the basics. Also, I consider that it would also work fine for high school students. It baffles me to read how some people feel threatened and terrified by something like this, labeling it as politically incorrect. And so, to be honest, I think it is highly hypocritical to condemn a method of this kind which is strictly focused on learning and applying principles that are required by the curriculum in the name of protecting the fragile and quasi-divine integrity of the students' feelings. When outside of the classroom, 14-year-old girls take selfies and get wasted without any remorse for publishing it on Twitter or Facebook. Story 22. I took a kid's phone and texted his mom saying, "I love you, and I think I'm old enough for more responsibility. Can I start mowing the lawn or wash the dishes or something to help you out?" The kid was 12 and hates me to this day. Story 23. I taught high school. This one kid was always in trouble, always on disciplinary probation, not an ounce of sense. During the last period of the day, the kid walked in with a soda, which was strange because lunch was already over a few hours ago. He was obviously dipping. I knew it, and he knew I knew. I picked up the can and acted like I was accidentally about to take a drink. He turned pale. Then I apologized and said, "Sorry, all yours down the hatch," and waited for him to guzzle it. He guzzled it, then asked if he could go to the restroom to retch. Better than being suspended for possessing tobacco. Story 24. When I was in 9th grade, I had a principal named Dr. Ridgway. My life was just a big ball of, to be honest, I was bullied. Living in a hooker motel, it was trashy that we couldn't afford, and I self-harmed. Dr. Ridgway went above and beyond for me. She obviously had to get the bullies, and she did. Anytime I felt the urge to self-harm. In school, I was in her office. She would let me sit outside the building and listen to music so I could calm down, and if it got too bad, I was allowed to call mom and go home. No questions asked. The most important thing she did. She asked the people who donated a lot of money to the school to help pay for us to live in a motel for another week. She did that 3 times till we got on our feet to live in an apartment. I've never had a teacher school worker. Means so much to me. I need to go visit her soon. Story 25. Not a teacher, but a student. I switched majors in college as a junior from business to geography. I had taken all the general ed classes, and I was in a hurry to learn something that would have something to do with some kind of career. I took all geography classes in 1 semester, including intro mapping classes and senior-level GIS courses. My advisor did bureaucratic magic to get me past prerequisites. I had one professor who taught 2 of my top-level classes. I came in with no previous experience in the software we used or any of the general knowledge required for the class. I had my nose to the grindstone and put in more effort than I ever had in college. In 3 weeks, my prof had me tutoring other students who weren't doing well in the class. The very first day of class, I wrote down the day in time for the final exam. Fast forward to the end of the semester, I'm sitting at an 88 with complete confidence in my ability to get an A. I show up for the final, and it turns out I wrote down the wrong time for the final. Showing up for it at the end time, not the start, I go to the professor's office to plead my case, hoping he'll let me take the final. He tells me I won't learn anything from this if he lets me take it, but he knows I put the effort into the class, and my final grade will reflect that. Grades come in, and I got a 90 in the class. Story 26. I needed one of those scientific calculators for a class exam, but my family couldn't afford one. My teacher took me to his office and handed me a brand new one in a box. He said, "I'd appreciate if you didn't tell anyone in class about this." Nearly cried. I was only about 13. I think I had it back to him like 5 years later, as I wouldn't be using it again, and told him to pass it on the next kid. Tell Mr. C. Story 27. Not the teacher, but I'll shout out to him. I had a research seminar class in high school. My father died from AIDS complications at the start of my senior year. Couldn't pull my together for that class, but tried. I ended up with a C despite knowingly missing even a passing mark. That was some 17 years ago. I eventually went on to become an emergency department nurse. There have been a handful of cases I directly saved someone's life. If that teacher had not passed me, I would not have been placed in that role for those people. Story 28. I have a little activity called secret compliments that I often do when I'm starting up or taking over a new class. It's a good way to get to know the students and also just try to increase the positivity in the room. Well, one time I got a bad vibe from a class right away, and I could kind of tell that all the other students disliked this one kid. Well, I did the secret compliments game anyway, where all of the kids write down nice things about another randomly chosen student, and then I read them at the front of the class. Sure enough, the kid who had to write a compliment for the class pariah wrote a nasty message instead of a compliment. I changed it on the spot to a nice compliment without anyone knowing except the kid who wrote, of course, and I made eye contact with him the whole time I was reading. I also purposefully saved his own compliment for last to make him sweat a little and wonder if anyone had written anything nice for him or if I was going to read it. At the end of the class, I took him aside and privately told him that he had a new homework assignment to write 10 nice things about the class pariah and give them to him personally, and that for every other kid he could get to do the same thing. I would give both him and the other kid a candy bar, but not to tell anyone about the candy bars or that I told him to do it. I'm a strong believer in the fake it till you make it school of thought. The next day, the class pariah had like 100 nice notes, which I, of course, read and checked over first, and I gave a sack full of candy bars Coffee Crisp. I love Coffee Crisp to the other guy to distribute. He got to see how much nicer it felt to be nice and became somewhat of a class leader. Maybe he was before I came in, but I like to think I had some positive effect on him. Story 29. This isn't in secret, but I just wanted to share about my 8th grade algebra teacher. He literally saved my life. I was very depressed, suicidal at the end of my senior year. My class went on a Europe trip, and about halfway through he noticed that I wasn't doing well. He came up to me and told me that he noticed, and I am capable of anything. That is the first time anyone has told me that. Because of him, I am doing well in my life. 2 years ago, he suddenly passed away at a very young age, around 30. He was such an inspirational teacher and will always be missed. Story 30. In my high school, our report cards only listed the letter value and not any pluses or minuses. One teacher would announce any in class after the reports came out. She didn't announce your letter grade, just a dash. One term she gave me a minus, 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 minus. I had a D. I was struggling in the class and had even gotten some tutoring, so she knew I was trying and had given me a little boost by not giving me a failing grade, but made it clear I had to push even harder. I managed to improve and pass the class with a B. An F may have made me give up on the class. Story 31. I explained to my grade 11 math teacher that I had no plans to do anything math-related, wasn't even going to take grade 12 math, and told her I was seeing a tutor, and she passed me when I don't think I quite made it. Not by much, but it didn't matter. Story 32. Former dance instructor and camp director for my very young dance students 3 to 5 years old. I had a bag full of ballet skirts for the girls to pick out and wear during class and a practice of handing out suckers for a job well done at the end of the class. If you didn't participate or didn't behave, you didn't get a sucker. Only once have I had to make a student return a skirt because she wasn't treating it kindly. She was trying to rip it apart. She pouted and refused to participate in class, so she didn't get a sucker. I had to explain very patiently to her mother why her daughter was crying and being cross. Her mom sided with me. Next week, she was last in line to pick a skirt, but I never had a problem with her afterwards. Chatty students I separated. Camp was an older group, and since I dealt with rowdy boys constantly, those punishments were the opposite of secret. I made it known that if you were sent to me, you were going to be seen at my side for the rest of the day, either quietly at my desk, eating lunch with the other staffers and I quietly, and if we walked anywhere, you had to hold my hand. Given that my campers were old enough to know what embarrassment was, there were very few repeat offenders. Story 33. Obligatory, not a teacher, but the kid who sits behind me in high school honors physics class is named Nico. Nice kid, funny, sarcastic, likes to joke and mess with the teachers, but knows when to shut the up. Teacher is named Mr. Thompson. Old guy, late 60s or early 70s, and was teaching at the same high school when my dad was a freshman here way back in 1976. We've only been in school 9 weeks, and I could fill a thread with stories from his class. Mr. T had already entered my top 3 favorite teachers list after the first class. His philosophy is simple: you respect me. I respect you. We took a test over vectors last week, which required the use of graphing calculators. 10 minutes left in class, and Nico is the last one to finish. Turns in test, goes back to seat, punches a few things in his calculator, then goes son of, he sighed loudly, then said, ridden with despair, Mr. T, already slightly amused. Thompson asked what the problem was. Nico had just realized that he had taken his entire test with his calculator set on the wrong mode. Therefore, all of his answers, it was safe to assume, were wrong, Mr. T took a minute to calm him down, then told Nico that he would grade the tests over the weekend and see what he could do, get the test back Monday. And come to find out that Mr. T had gone through every problem on Nico's test, following his work on a separate calculator with it set on the same mode as Nico's was during the test, and graded it based on Nico's understanding of how to solve the problems. He still ended up getting a C, but it still shows the level of commitment and respect he has for his students. One quick Thompson tale: the girl who sits in front of me is a foreign exchange student from Finland, with a name that has a syllable transition seldom seen in the U.S. I believe her name is pronounced something like PNYH. The first class, Mr. T, was having a few issues getting around her name, and finally said the following: "I'm sorry, you'll have to excuse me, but I'm very old. Life is very precious, and I don't know how much I have left. So in the name of making an efficient use of that time, until I can create space in my old brain for your name, they're going to have to call you Fez."